Hello and welcome to Gemini Rising. My name is Natalie Sady, and joining me as always is my co-host Anne Wohlcke.
Hello.
And today's episode, we are welcoming back a former guest, Christopher Maher. I hope I pronounce that correctly because I always say it wrong.
Christopher Lee Maher.
Sorry, I didn't realize we needed the Lee in there. I do apologize for that. Christopher is a former Navy SEAL, an author, an incredible healer, and someone that is so fun to talk to. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. You ladies look great.
Thank
Feel
you so
good,
much.
sound good. I'm happy to be here and serve.
Thanks.
Well, today's conversation is a little bit different to the last time because we were talking about the sort of work that you do, and anyone that hasn't watched that episode, I will include the link in the description so that people can go back and watch that. Today's conversation has kind of evolved from when we first started talking about it to where we are today because of conversations that have been going on in the previous days and weeks between us. And what I wanted to start with is we live in a time where there is a lot of sexual freedom and people have the availability of sex essentially whenever they want it. There are apps that allow people to either date or hook up. There is, for the most part, very little judgment as to what people do. Everybody always says, do whatever you want as long as you're safe. But one of the things that we don't talk about is the energetic exchange that takes place when there is this sexual connection. And the conversation about this started between you and I, Christopher, when I was preparing for my interview with Lisa Sunny, and we were talking about domestic violence and how women get caught up in these relationships and why they stay. And I wanted you to explain a little bit about, from your point of view, why women, once they're in these relationships, why do they find it so difficult to leave?
I think the first thing for me to talk about in relationship to that, so the listeners understand what I do for work, is a large portion of the people that I work with over especially the last, I would say, 7 years, has been men and women who have been sexually traumatized, sexually stressed, or had experiences that were sexually distorting. And so I've spent, 7, 8, sometimes 10 hours a day focused in this direction 5 days a week. And so I understand the energetic exchange when it comes to sexual exchange from a very unique perspective. And so I've studied traditional Chinese medicine. My background is also in studying epigenetics, genetics, personalities, genetic archetypes, human design, true body intelligence, and all the systems in there. And so I understand the sexual channel and all of its power probably in a more unique way than any other human on the planet. Because I had a mother who was sexually traumatized when she was 13 years old. And I had a grandmother who was sexually traumatized when she was very young as well. And so if you go through my lineage, right, there's a lot of sexual stress, a lot of sexual distortion, a lot of sexual trauma. And when you talk about relationships and sexual energy, you have to understand that there's two base frequencies, right? And the two base frequencies, when the sexual channels are stressed, operate very differently compared from men to women. And so men are more masculine in nature. And so we have to have at least a little bit of a conversation or an education around understanding energetic dynamics as it relates to the human body. So the brain is, in traditional Chinese medicine, is considered to be the governing vessel. And what does that mean? That means through the nervous system, through the nerves, that enter into every part of you, into your heart, into your liver, into your bones, into your muscles, and to all of these different systems. Its job is to pick up information. And then based on that data and information, its job is to make decisions. Okay. Women, so men are more electric by nature because we're masculine. So we're more connected to the brain aspect of sexuality, the electrical aspect. Women are more connected to the magnetic aspect of the, because all, I mean, of the sexual body, of the human body, because magnetism is generated through the sexual organs. Now, for all of us, we're made up of electromagnetic energy. So the energy that is developed in the brain and the energy that's developed in the sexual organs, that's primary frequency. So because of those two frequencies, we're able to copulate and to continue the development and the evolution of the race. Okay. If we take the sexual energy away, if we take the electrical energy away, as it relates to sexuality, there's no copulation and there's no more humans that are developed, right? So the race basically ends. And so the challenge is this: when you look at the human body, you have to understand that men, when a young man, when a young woman is born, she comes into this world with her eggs are already intact. Okay. So let's say, and I forget, let's say it's 30,000 eggs, right? She gets more than she ever needs. Okay. She gets more than she's ever going to use. And then a man, his ejaculate is developed every day, every week, every month for the entirety of his life. What's inside of a woman's eggs are the intelligence from the generation before her. What's inside the male ejaculate is his life experiences, his vision, his dreams, his desires that he's been developing in this lifetime, plus all of the limitations in his ancestors' lineage. Okay, that's all packed into that full blown ejaculate. So when a couple gets together, that is, let's say they built a relationship over time and they started out with attention. They moved, let's say they start out with attraction, then they moved to attention. And from attention, they elevated that to having affectionate relationship, right? And now they're having a deeper level of connection and they move into intimacy. So now they're having deeper conversations, they're having more affectionate touch, they're having longer hugs, kisses on the cheek, holding hands, right? They're getting into this level of intimate exchange. And then at some point, when there's more trust, now trust comes from the brain, okay? When there's more trust, then guess what's you're gonna move into a more of a sensual exchange, right? And so sensuality would be touching in the nether regions, kissing, French kissing, all these different types of exchanges that we can have that are more sensual and more exotic. And then if there's more trust that's established and developed, you can move into exchanging fluids, right? Sexual fluids that are from the through the penis and into the vagina, right? Man has deep feelings for a woman and he releases his ejaculate into her vagina. That ejaculate is very sticky. Okay. It's almost like glue. Okay. Because it has a lot of sugar in it. Right. Because that sugar needs to be able to supply the sperm with enough energy to be able to make it all the way up to the egg, penetrate into the egg, and start making a baby. All right. So that's what the ejaculate is for. It's to, one, influence the woman to support the man's dreams, desires, and visions based on the intelligence and the information and data that's inside that ejaculate. So, what you brought up earlier is that men and women are having casual exchanges of sexuality before building before taking the necessary steps to build a lifelong partnership. And we're, like, for instance, let's take animals, right? Like dogs will are running around in the wild, and there's cats that are feral. Well, they're deciding to be sexual when the cat is in heat for the purpose of having a baby, right? Most animals in the wild are never really having sex just for the pleasure and exchange of emotion. And so sexuality has shifted dramatically from copulation for the purpose of expanding the race and the evolution of mankind for deep emotional connection, right? Well, what happens is if a man chooses to then ejaculate in a woman's body who he doesn't have deep, long feelings for, then one, that confuses her body because the place that it's coming from emotionally is empty, right? She wants him to come from a place that's really fulfilled. Well, if that male that isn't very interested in who she is for the long term leaves an ejaculate inside the middle of her body, he leaves his dreams, his desires, his wants, and his needs inside of the most sensitive part of her, let's say, of her biology. Okay. Now that information, it starts attaching to the neck, to the walls of her vagina. So his cells start binding with the cells on the neck of her vagina. And then she starts orientating her life process towards supporting his vision, his desires, his wants, and his dreams. So she becomes a supportive agent of his desires, his wants, and his dreams. So imagine you're having a casual relationship and you have someone who's ejaculating into you that you don't really know. So let's say you're on, one of these. Can you name a couple of these apps? I think there's Bumblebee, there's
Tinder,
Tinder,
Hinge.
Hinge, right? Okay, so you have the apps, and then you're having a casual exchange. But this guy's desires, wants, and dreams, he's been building these fantasies and ideas in his head for, let's say, he's 40 years old, or he's 38 years old, or he's 35 years old for at least 30 years. So that goes into the middle of her body, and it informs her bodies to start altering her desires and wants and her dreams to blend with his. Okay. But the same thing isn't happening to him. Okay. Because her egg isn't going into the middle of his body and telling him to orientate his desires, wants, and dreams towards hers. Right. And so my feeling is that in these casual relationships, if women are allowing men to ejaculate into the middle of their body that they don't know, they don't realize that there's a cost, right? And the cost is there's a lot of confusion around who she understands she is. Because the second that goes into her and it starts binding to her walls, the neck of her vagina, she starts craving him in a way that's unnatural relative to the type of relationship that they have. So let's say they have a friends with benefits relationship, or they have a Tinder developed relationship. She knows him for a week, and now she's orientating her life expression towards him. That seems like unfair and inequitable exchange for what she's receiving. Right. And so then the question is, how does a woman deal with this kind of thing that's happening to her, but isn't happening to him? Okay. So then what happens? Let's say they have that exchange 3 or 4 times. By the 4th time she's had that exchange, her body, as it's preparing for its next cycle, right? She's letting go, she's menstruating, and her body's getting ready to release the next egg. Her body's preparing for him because it's been told to her It's been informed that, hey, this is the person that I should be preparing to surround my life around, except she has this very casual, inconsistent relationship. Well, that's going to create a lot of confusion at an emotional level. And then she's going to start to feel an intense amount of separation from herself, but also frustration. And she's not going to know why she's doing all of this. And so a lot of times when they get into these casual types of relationship, what's involved is some form of inebriation, right? So there's either whiskey, beer, wine, or marijuana, right? And marijuana is moving its way up the food chain. And so now she's having this sexual experience where she's accepting his ejaculate into her body and she's inebriated. So there's high levels of confusion going on energetically, physically, spiritually, but also now physiologically. And then now this relationship started so fast that it's going to end as fast as it started. Because there isn't any development and consistency in terms of intimacy, affection, attention, connection. They never went through the stages of sexual development in order to bond at the right time and in the right way. And so then the relationship's going to start and it's going to end. And then for her, it's going to lead to her having negative feelings and thoughts about herself. And then what she's going to try to prove more is that she's earned the right to be a free woman in the world. And now she's going to go out, she's going to get back on the app, and she's going to try to cover up the insufficiency and the insecurity that she's feeling inside of herself because of all of the confusion from the last exchange that she's had. And so for me, I would advise all of those women to be sure that if you don't have a male that's going to bond to you in a long term, that doesn't want to at least investigate the relationship for 6 months or a year or two, that you should probably be wearing a condom so that his prosthetic fluid isn't coming into the neck of your vagina and altering who it is you are. And so that you have more control and you maintain your own sense of sovereignty over yourself. Because the second that ejaculate goes and bonds to the inside neck of your walls, you no longer have sovereignty over yourself. That's the challenge, and that's the problem, and that's the cost. And so as a woman loses her sense of sovereignty over herself, what is she going to do? She's going to work really hard to prove that she is sovereign. And so she's going to take on behaviors that actually defeat her and drive her out of her feminine nature. And so the question is there a solution? Obviously, do yourself a favor. Make sure that they're wearing a condom and their prosthetic fluid doesn't make it to the walls, to the neck of the walls of your vagina. Because if you want to have these types of exchanges because you're missing intimacy in your life, well, what could be more intimate than intercourse? Like someone is bringing their energy, their body, their fluid, their sweat, and their emotions, and they're leaving it directly in the middle of your body. And that's very, very intimate for a woman. A man doesn't have in a traditional relationship, a man doesn't have the same thing that's going on. And so this is something that women, young women especially, have to be aware about. I think probably as a woman ages, she becomes more clear of the effect of consensual, how would you phrase this? Surface level relationships. She understands the cost of that, and she probably has less of those as she gains more wisdom. And she understands the effect, and she does some self-analysis and introspection, and she assesses whether or not this is correct for her. But I think for younger women, they don't understand the cost of those exchanges when a man is ejaculating the center of the body. So what they need to learn is what's called the recapitulation process. And recapitulation was a process that was taught to women in ancient times because men would go to war. Like, for instance, if I was a Roman soldier and we were going to take over, we were going to go all the way to England and take over London, or go all the way to Spain and take over Spain, we could be gone for 3-4 years. Well, that woman is naturally going to be going out and having sexual relationships while her man is gone. And then what's going to happen is she's going to have to recapitulate and release all those men from her body so she can bring her sexuality back to a state of neutral. Because a man knows when he comes back into a relationship with a woman whether or not someone else has imprinted their life frequency into the middle of her body. And so how does a woman gain sovereignty over her body when she's decided that she needs physical affection? That's what they used to do in the past. Well, now relationships are very different in the sense that there's an openness. There's women are free to explore their sexuality from a position of empowerment. And if you're going to stay in power and maintain sovereignty over yourself, recapitulation is at least an interesting conversation for you, at the least, but probably an actionable step that you could take that would be heartfelt and to your benefit. And so the question is, what could they do to recapitulate? And the first thing that a woman would do is she would give a specific command and demand to her flesh. And she would say, body, brain, nervous system, open up a direct line of communication between all of your meta systems and locate all of the sexual energy sitting in the middle of my body that I picked up from blank, and send it back to the light, to the benefit of myself and to the benefit of blank and to the benefit of all others. And so it is forevermore. And she may repeat that 9 times at the least. 36 times probably would be the best idea. And then by the time she's reached the 36th time, his energy is no longer occupying space in her nervous system. That would be my suggestion. Because I think it's great to identify a problem, but if you identify a problem and you don't have a solution, well, people know that, wow, I got the knowledge, but I don't have a way out of this. So how do I create resolution for this thing that's going on that is, in a certain way, it's its own form of an epidemic, right? Women are losing sovereignty over themselves and they don't understand the way that men are gaining control over them. Well, every woman should want to maintain sovereignty in her own relationship. And the only way to do that is to send the energy back to the light after you're complete. Because if you are exchanging sexual energy at any level relationship, let's say you're married, or it's your fiance, or it's your long-term boyfriend, you want to maintain sovereignty over yourself so you don't go crazy inside of a relationship. And then you maintain a state of neutrality in the relationship. Otherwise, a woman becomes too vulnerable to desires, the wants, and the needs of a man.
So bringing that back to, because in the beginning I asked sort of multiple questions or brought up multiple points, but bringing it back to the whole domestic violence situation, how does that impact a woman staying in a relationship like that?
Well, it's easy, because now that he is in the middle of her body, it feels better for him to be around than for him to go. Because if he goes, she actually, the center of her body feels abandoned by him. And that is a deeper emotional pain than physical violence. So emotional pain is much more difficult than physical pain. Physical pain comes and goes, but emotional pain can stay around for years. And so, because she becomes him, she's willing to accept all of who he is, because he's in the middle of her body and she can't tell the difference between him and her. That's the challenge with someone ejaculating into the middle of your body who's physically violent or emotionally violent. Well, do you want to be at the emotional effect of that every second of the day? I would think that most women would say no. If you could have the relationship with a man and you could maintain sovereignty over yourself, and he could have his emotional space in the relationship and you could have yours, and those things weren't fighting and over commingling, then you would have a relationship of interdependence. But if you're in that relationship, now she's forced into a state of codependency. And now she's over giving more of her life force to maintain that relationship, even through violence. So essentially what we're saying is you become the man when he ejaculates inside of you. You become him, and you're willing to take on every part of him, his inner deficiencies, his insecurities, his limiting beliefs, and his fears. They become your insecurities, your limiting beliefs, and your fears. And so even if a woman gets divorced, if she doesn't have a man imprint on her after the divorce, that man that she's divorced from still has absolute control over her body at a deep emotional level. He can trigger her. He can pull all of her strings. He can shut her down emotionally. All of that can happen. And so for me, the obvious thing, like, I'm a man, but if I had a vagina, believe you me, I would be recapitulating after some dude dropped a load in my body. Like, that sounds crude, right? But those are the facts, okay? Like, all of him is coming inside of you and sticking to the walls, the innards of you. And the woman's greatest power in her entire body is her sexual energy. If she doesn't maintain sovereignty over that, she cannot maintain an equal footing in the relationship. It's impossible, because she will become overly emotional. The man will think, look how emotional she is. She's being crazy like she always is. And she'll start to have these behaviors to attempt to maintain a 50% footing in the relationship, but she can't if she's being who he is. Because her body has to be loyal, because there's the potential that she could be having his child. And if she gets pregnant, then she needs to maintain the relationship with him so he provides the food and the home. And this is how the biology is manipulating the emotions. Well, if you're not, as a woman, if you're not having a child, then you don't want to give up your 50% footing within the relationship, because it will drive you crazy emotionally, and then you'll feel less than in the relationship, and then you'll start acting out emotionally, and then the more you act out, the crazier he thinks you are, and then he's going to want to drop you off in the mailbox one day and get rid of you, even though he loves and cares for you. And so men didn't need to be taught a recapitulation process. Women were taught the recapitulation process so they could maintain sovereignty in the relationship. But the question is why? And the reason for it is because there's four worlds. There's physical, and there's mental, analytical, there's spiritual, and they're emotional. Each race was given two worlds. Women were given the spiritual world, and they were given the emotional world. And men were given sovereignty over analysis and physical power. Okay? So the women, when they raised the children in the household, they were responsible for the spiritual development of the child and the emotional development of the child. The father's job was to develop them physically and develop them analytically. When a woman allows the man to continue to ejaculate in her body, she has sovereignty over none of those parts in the relationship. She gives up 2 of the quarters necessary for a dollar bill. And then what does a woman do? In order to stay in a relationship, she then needs to see the therapist. The therapist says, oh my God, I can see you're depressed. Let me give you such and such. And then soon enough, the depressants are not working anymore. So he says, okay, let's give you an antipsychotic. Okay. Think about, let's put those 2 words together. Antipsychotic. Well, the question is, why would a woman need an antipsychotic inside of a relationship if she was actually afforded the ability to be herself? She would never need an antipsychotic, and she wouldn't need an antidepressant, because she would have sovereignty over herself, and she would have sovereignty and the respect in the relationship over those 2 worlds, over the emotional world and over the spiritual world. And the husband, the boyfriend, the fiance would be willing to take her counsel. But if she's being him, he's never going to take her counsel, because he looks at her as just being a part of himself. She's just like his hand, or she's like his wrist, or she's like his elbow, she's like his knee. She's no longer like herself. And so recapitulation needs to be established as a tradition within masculine and feminine relationships.
So one last question before I let Anne even say a word. So the same.
But hold on, before you ask any questions, I want
Yeah.
to know how you relate to what I'm saying.
Relate to it, or
Yeah, like as you took in the information, like how does that hit you? How do you? Oh, okay. Well, tell me more about, like, what are you getting from the conversation?
well, Anne, do you want to answer first, just because you haven't spoken at all?
Fine, give me the big question. um, I was thinking about, I guess, my relationships that I've had and how much I feel like maybe how much I feel that I actually did take on a man's hopes and fears, or whatever he would be transferring to me. And I definitely can see that my life went in partially a direction towards, like, for example, my ex-husband. But what I keep wondering about as I'm listening to this is, but you're building a relationship with someone. And so let's say it's somebody that you do plan to have kids with. So they're going to be ejaculating inside of you.
Yep.
It just is.
And
But at the same time, you want to maintain some sort of autonomy, because also you're in a relationship with someone who picked you for your particular personality too. I would assume most men don't want to just be in a relationship with themselves, right? So what does a healthy exchange look like?
great. So that's true. Men do not want to be in a relationship with themselves. So whose responsibility is it then to recapitulate? To do the recapitulation process? It's the responsibility of the woman, because her job is to maintain the emotional intelligence in the relationship. Well, when we look at the liver and the gallbladder together, they make up dependency, they make up codependency, but they also make up independence and um, and interdependence. And so when those 2 energies are functioning at a very high level, each has their own lane, and each respects how each other feels and thinks and moves through the world. Right. Well, when there's this excessive commingling that's happening, they get put into what's called a codependent relationship. And now they start taking on roles that are unnatural for that polarity. Right. So if we look at humans as polarity, men are a positive charge, women are a negative charge. Okay. How do we know that? Because a woman's heart is a positive charge, a man's heart is a negative charge, but his penis is a positive charge, and the woman's vagina is a negative charge, right? And so when a woman and a man lay on top of each other, her, what you would call her now this could be funny, her heart cock, right, penetrates his heart gina, right?
Hmm.
Because a woman's love penetrates into a man's chest because she's emotionally involved. But if we go downstairs, a man's penis penetrates into a woman's vagina. So she's a negative pole down here, right? So when you look at men and women, they have different forms of polarity and how they penetrate into each other. So let's take, if you brought up your ex, so we can investigate that for a minute. So if we look at your ex and he's ejaculating in your body and you get pregnant and you're having a child, well, after you have the child, you no longer after let me say this, after you get pregnant, you no longer need to keep his ejaculate. You can start the recapitulation process every time he ejaculates in your body and send that energy back to the light, so you can maintain sovereignty on yourself and you can have an interdependent relationship.
Well, what about a man, from a man's perspective? If a man knows this is the process that's happening, what would he want to be thinking or doing entering into this process? Is he thinking, this is fertile ground, I am fertilizing, I am building my hopes and dreams?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of men also that they don't treat it with sacredness, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of men are taught when we're really young, because we go to like a health science class in like 7th and 8th grade, and we start talking about sperm and ejaculation and the vagina and the ovaries and the uterus and oh my God, if the sperm goes inside of her, then she could get pregnant, right? So men want to have sex when they're younger, but they don't want to get a woman pregnant because they're scared to death of the idea of having to provide for a child without having the education necessary in order to build a life, right? So men start out initially like, well, that's the last thing that I want to do, right? And so now they're scared, right? There's a fear around, like, if this goes in her, I could possibly be screwing up my whole life, right? And that's what her mom's telling them, like, you better not get her pregnant, right? Dad's saying, look, if you get her pregnant, you're going to be working with me in the garage. Oh no. And so there are all these fears and misinformation that are built around sexual exchange. And I think that if mothers and fathers are raising their sons to understand that there's an energetic impact and that a man has a fiduciary responsible to become the best version of himself, right? So for instance, if let's say a woman gets in exchange with a man she's having sex with, and this guy does drugs, right? And she doesn't smoke marijuana, right? But this guy she met on Twitter, he's a pothead, right? And she's on the pill and she wants to feel the ejaculate, right? Her eggs are screaming like, you, come on, let's go. Okay. But the eggs don't know that, nothing's going to happen even if he does, but they're still like, ooh, there's connection. There's the potential to have a child. And he leaves his ejaculate inside of her. Well, that THC makes its way into the prosthetic fluid. And then guess what happens in 3 months? Guess who starts smoking marijuana? She does. Okay. Now she's smoking, she's puffing away. And she was dead set against it. So, meaning that whatever the man's development is, that's what goes into the middle of the woman's body. His ambitions, his intelligence, his practices, every bit of him is what lands in the middle of her. This is why she knows exactly what he's thinking and how he's feeling. This is how women tune into men. They have his ejaculate inside their body, so they know what's going on with him because they have the imprint of it. Okay. So men have a fiduciary responsibility in order to develop themselves so that when that sperm gets into the egg, or when that ejaculate starts reaching the neck of her vagina, he's bringing good chi, good energy, high level consciousness, right? High level intelligence into the middle of her body. But if a woman gets a guy that's underdeveloped, right? Doesn't have a job, he's a pothead, he lives in his mom's basement, he's emotionally dishonest, he's a sugar addict. Well, all of that goes into the middle of her body. Does that sound like a good idea to you ladies?
Obviously not.
Yeah, or does that sound like a recipe for like a disaster? Like, see, the challenge is that women have the ability to see the best in a man, but what they lack is the ability to see where the man really is. And they have to understand when they accept his ejaculate, they're accepting all of his high qualities, but also all of his shortcomings. And so women who are having casual relationships on Twitter with these men that they don't know, they're accepting all of this energy to go inside of them. Okay. And now they've been imprinted into their nervous system his whole historical record. And so, would it be a better idea to investigate, or at least sheathe that penis in a condom until you know more about him? Okay. Get your physical needs met, but without the risk of taking someone into the middle of you that you don't know. Because people are good at presenting like, look, I am, I'm the ocean and the mountains and the sea and the beautiful sunshine, right? But then they don't show you the clouds, they don't show you the rainy days, they don't show you the mudslide, they don't show you any of that, right? And so until a woman is ready to see and accept all of a man, and she's investigated thoroughly who he is from top to bottom, back to front, and out, then she should probably sheathe that penis with a condom so he doesn't come in and start disrupting her own nature. Because once that happens, she begins losing sovereignty over herself until she recapitulates back to her own nervous system.
So this is everything you've just said has essentially answered the other question I was going to ask, which was, so when we watch people get into relationships, and we've all had friends and family that have done this at some point, where you've got someone, they get into a relationship with someone that maybe you don't like, but obviously they do. But as the years go on, the person that you loved starts becoming a version of their husband. And it all comes down to this whole thing that you've been talking about, that it's she's reorienting herself towards him.
And then one day she wakes up and she hates him. Go ahead, you were going to say.
Oh, well, no, I was going to move on to something else. So if there's more to that statement, please.
Yeah, like for instance, if a woman constantly is giving up another piece of herself. So for instance, like I work on humans physically as well. So I always look at their hands, their head, their neck, their feet, their waist, the curvature of their pelvis. And guess what you see all the time? Men come in here, but it's very rare that a man's big toe is pushing towards his three middle toes and he has a bunion. Okay. Women quite often have that all the time when they come in here. And the question is, why do they have that? They have that because the woman is sacrificing herself in order to maintain a relationship with the other person. And I can tell you that at least 7 of the 10 women that enter into my office come in with feet and toes that are distorted. And that distortion structurally is letting me know that there's a distortion psychologically, there's a distortion emotionally, and there's a distortion systemically, meaning physiologically, in their sexuality. And then one day they wake up and they're like, Bob, honey, I love you, but, this relationship is over for me. Well, why is it over? It's over because she never maintained her own sovereign space. And if you're not willing to maintain your own sovereignty, men will allow you to continue to just keep falling into their path. They're like, oh, you want to put your train on my track? Fine, you can put your train on my track, no problem. But your train needs to go behind mine, right? Like your train right? Like you're the caboose now. I'm the one determining how much coal the engine gets. Okay. I determine when we get to pull down the notch for the horn. Woo, 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 woo. And you get to hold the passengers. Okay. And deal with, the baby who's puked on the floor and the drunk who's puked in the bathroom and the couple in the back who's talking too loud and inconsiderate and the guy who's snoring in the front. And, the person with body, you get to deal with all that. And I just get to be at the front of the train. And for me, everything's wonderful and glorious. And for you, you're like, oh my fuck God, gee, I have to deal with this. They stink, they're farting, there's puke everywhere. Yeah, you have to deal with all that. So wouldn't you want to be in a relationship where the train tracks were side by side and they were connected and both tracks went in the same direction, okay? Rather than you having to be the caboose. Well, any woman having a casual relationship through apps and letting men ejaculate into their bodies is always going to be the caboose. And she's going to be forced to sacrifice herself to maintain a relationship with him because he has sovereignty over her body.
So the next part of what I wanted to say was more.
But hold on, I have some questions. So knowing that information, how would you two ladies have conducted yourself differently in your past?
You know what's interesting? What makes sense to me is that I'm trying to think if this is too much information for you two.
Well, I mean, we're way out on a ledge for people. Okay, we might as well stay out there. We're on the fringe of what most people can handle. So,
well, has Natalie, have you ever had a case where you sort of had a reaction or were almost allergic to another man's ejaculate? Because what's interesting is that I had a relationship with someone where it was like right away, I just realized this is not good. And so I always preferred to have a condom because of that. And I'm wondering if on that other emotional, energetic level, that was my body having a reaction because it was not a good match or whatever, that I didn't want to absorb all of that energy.
I did. There was I won't say it was a brief relationship, but it was shorter than what most of my relationships are because I tend to be in a serious monogamous relationship for an extended period, or I am celibate for an even more extended period of time. But there was someone where it wasn't a healthy relationship for me and my body fully rejected this person. And I ended up at the doctor's. I was getting tested for STDs because at that point, that's what I was convinced was going on. And I was put on some very hardcore antibiotics. There was no STD. I didn't test positive for anything. And even the antibiotics didn't clear it up. And I had to go to another doctor. And she actually said to me, this is your body rejecting this person. Don't you ever be with them again. And I sat there and went, yep, that sounds about right. So yes, my body has absolutely let me know. I wonder if I actually think the abusive relationship that I talk about quite frequently in my oracle readings and when I did the interview with Lisa Sunny about domestic violence, I had constant and continual UTIs with him. I mean, to a point where we went through so much investigation physically to see if there was actually something going on with my bladder, with my kidneys, all of that. There wasn't anything. And I realized when I got out of the relationship that it was him. He was the issue. Or it was my body reacting to him, and it was the unhealthiest relationship I have ever been in. And talk about reorientating to him. That is absolutely what my entire relationship was. It's the only relationship where I've been unhealthily jealous and unable to control, sort of get a hold of my emotions. And when I finally walked away from all of that and I was able to see things objectively, I realized that if I ever get to that state mentally, that is not the relationship for me, because that's not a healthy space for me. But I never thought of the physical ramifications of any of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing, because, the thing is that there's going to be women who listen to this, right? And it's nice for me to deliver the information, but if you don't have women that have had the experience, it's difficult for them to be able to relate. So they need to know that, like, oh, I am without a vagina. So I understand the science of it, right? Because I'm highly energetically intelligent. And so it's easy for me to piece these things together, because, again, I've worked with a lot of men and a lot of women that have been in sexually and emotionally traumatic relationships. And so much of it comes down to the conversation that we're having today. And so if you're a listener and you're out there, I know this may be out on the fringe for you, but I want you to understand that if I had a daughter, this would be the very first conversation I would be having with my daughter. The very first conversation, being that she would get this education. She'd be like, "Dad, stop. I can't believe you're talking about this." And I'd be like, "Well, we're going to have this conversation, and we're going to have it again. You're 13. We're going to have it again when you're 14. We're going to have it again when you're 15. By the time my daughter left my house at 18, she would fully understand the cost of opening her body up and having a male ejaculate into her that she doesn't know and doesn't love. Because without love and knowingness, why would any woman allow any man to ejaculate into her body, knowing that his ejaculate could completely derail and disrupt her life experience and her sovereignty over herself?"
I need to say, so I feel like my body and my intuition has guided me a lot through my life. I've talked, if anybody watches Full Disclosure, about medical decisions that I've made for myself, that my body and my gut has kind of said, don't do this, or you should do this in regard to your health. In relation to sexual exchange and energetic exchange, I have sexual trauma from when I was young. And as I was growing up, even as a young adult, I was very lucky that I got into a very long-term relationship when I was 15, and I was with him until I was 25. I married him, and he was a very safe space for me in so many ways, in that he knew my trauma, he understood it, he was very patient with me, he was very caring, and we kind of grew up together sexually. So that was a very, very safe space for me. But being in the workforce as an adult, I had the issue of, there were men that I worked with that would place bets, and I would find this out either at the time or very often after the fact, that they would place bets as to who could sleep with me first. And none of them ever won the bet, because, like I said, serial monogamist, and that's just what it is. And it repulsed me. I think I've got a very healthy attitude towards sex. I'm very open about it. And I think it's important for women to understand their bodies and be able to have these discussions. With that being said, I've always been one of those people that if my friends want to go out and sleep around, I always say, just please be safe, do whatever you want to do. I've never judged anyone. But for me, I always felt like that energetic exchange was so incredibly important that for me, unless there was an emotional or an intellectual connection, my entire body would shut off and just be like, nope, there's no coming in here. And I feel like, even though I didn't have this depth of understanding of what we're talking about today, there was something deeper inside me that kind of knew there was something going on in that exchange that I needed to protect at all costs. And I feel very fortunate having this discussion that there's very few men that I need to let go of.
Yeah, yeah. And do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I feel the same way also. And as Natalie was talking, I was sitting here thinking, do men feel the same way? I mean, it's different. It's a physical experience for men. And I've always wondered, I mean, I guess I always assumed that men also would want to be careful with the energy exchange themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So the penetration into the heart, right? So when the
Mm,
woman is, if you are with a woman who's unbalanced emotionally as a man, and you're allowing her heart cock to penetrate your heart gina, then what happens is she will feel comfortable at some point um, being abusive emotionally, right? And so, as a man, you have to be really mindful of the woman that you're choosing in terms of her relationship with her father, right? And look, if you're with a woman and she's had a difficult relationship with her father, you have to encourage her to repair that relationship, because those emotions that she has, those fears, those insecurities, those limiting beliefs, that trauma, that strama, that distortion, that tension, that stress of that relationship with her father will be penetrated and pushed into your heart.
mm,
And so this is where men have to be really mindful, because men are 7 times more sensitive emotionally than women. The question is, how do we know that? For every million people who commit suicide, 786,000 of them, or is it 876,000 of them are men. It's one or the other, 786,800. Let's say the number's high. Okay. So it's 1 for 7. 7 men commit suicide, 1 woman does, because men are much more sensitive at an emotional level. And so as a man, I want to encourage you to choose women who have repaired and are in good standing and good relationship with their fathers, because they will make much better partners versus women who have very complex anger-based relationships with their fathers, because their experience of that relationship as a child is one of anger. And so she's going to express her love through emotional imbalance and varying unpredictable levels of anger. And so, women, any woman who's on the call, I want to encourage you to repair that relationship with your father if you're serious about having a relationship with a man. Now, a lot of women, they go, look, my relationship with my father was complex. It was so complex, I could never, ever trust a man. So I'm going to have a relationship with a woman. I still think that there's great benefit that even if you're a woman in a homosexual relationship, there's benefit to you repairing that relationship, because every woman has a masculine aspect of herself and every woman has a feminine aspect to her personality, even though her body is feminine. And so, with that in mind, each woman has a fiduciary responsibility, because they are more emotionally intelligent, to be sure to repair that relationship with the father in any way, shape, or form. And if a woman can do that, she can handle having a relationship with a strong, self focused male.
What does a woman do if the father is abusive, if it's not an easy relationship to repair?
Yeah, well, the first thing that she does is she starts to have these conversations with him psychically, right? And that means in her mind, she's picturing him, she can see him, and she's informing him of all the ways in which she's hurt, and all the ways in which she's confused, and all the ways in which she's angry and anxious. And as she does that again and again and again and again, she figures out that over time he starts to soften, because every human is physical and psychological and emotional and energetic, but they're also psychic. And so she can penetrate through the psychic plane to have conversations with his soul and with his spirit. And she can request that his soul and spirit speaks with his guides and opens up opportunities for her to be able to have these, begin having these conversations. And she does have these conversations with a technique called tickle slap tickle. Okay. And tickle slap tickle means she tells her father all the things that she appreciates about him and all the ways that he's been highly beneficial to her. And then she tells him all the things that have been difficult for her and all the ways in which how that relationship has impacted her relationship with men. And then she finishes off with all the wonderful things that she appreciates and adores about him. Because men are 7 times more sensitive emotionally. So if you start addressing any man in the world with all of the things that he's doing wrong, he's never going to be able to hear her. Because men are so sensitive in the heart space. Women are warriors, right? Women are Navy SEALs when it comes to the heart. Okay. Men are pussies. Okay. And so a woman can take 1,000 pounds of criticism. A man can handle an ounce. And so if a woman understands this about a man and she goes, oh, wow, my man grows through sugar. Because men can handle sweet, they can't handle salt. So with a woman always stays in a train side by him by informing him about all the things that he does wonderful. And every time that she does something, every time that he does something that she enjoys and she likes, she compliments it. And then what a man does is he goes, oh, that's good. I should do more of that. But if a woman addresses a man, meaning she addresses her father with all of the ways in which he's failed her, he won't be able to hear her because he can't handle it. And the likelihood is he'll do something to harm himself. He'll, instead of smoking 3 bowls, he'll smoke 5. Instead of driving home at 55 miles an hour on a 35-mile road, he'll drive 60. Okay. And he'll defeat himself and he'll hurt himself in some way. And if she gets to the point where she's too explosive with it, he will attack her and shut her down. And so if you're going to have success with a man who's difficult, and the men who are difficult probably are alpha males, right? Men who've had a lot of success in the world, but also men who are either alcoholics or drug addicts because their brains have lost a lot of neuroplasticity. And so you have to build the man's trust by complimenting him, celebrating him on the things that you like that he does. And then he starts to open his heart more because he goes, wow, I can trust her. Because most men have been severely criticized by their mothers and told how they need to live. Okay. Because dads weren't home, dads were out working. So moms have had more influence over males than fathers have had influence over females. And so most men emotionally are severely damaged. And so most women who are marrying a man, the man they're marrying is handicapped emotionally. And they need to understand this. And so to repair a relationship with the father is the same way that you repair the relationship with a boyfriend or a husband. You begin the conversations psychically. And then you make sure that you're in your rapport and trust colors when you want to have these conversations, because the man is more willing to hear you because of the congruency. He'll trust you. And so for every woman on the call, what are your rapport and trust colors? Any shirt or pant or sweater or scarf that's in your eye color, your skin tone, or your natural hair color. And if you want to have these deep, emotionally moving conversations, then you've got to come to the dance in the right dress. Okay? You got to come to the dance in the right dress. And then what you're going to do, you're using color and energy to manipulate the environment to help him see some of his own shortcomings. But no man will look at his shortcomings unless you show him his high comings first. Does that make sense to both of you?
It does.
Okay. So tell me experiences that you've had where you can recognize that that has value, or where it's blown up in your face, where you've gone straight to the problem, right? What's the, share with me your level of success when you've applied both strategies.
Well, in relation to the relationship I have with my dad, I'm very lucky. I had a terrible relationship with my mother. We didn't speak for the last 5 years of her life. With my dad, it's a completely different relationship. And even when there has been tension, it's always been reasonably easily resolved. What I did learn, though, about him was if I go to him, and it's not even attacking him, but if he feels that it's an attack, he comes out. I don't even think it's in defense of himself. He comes out swinging verbally, not in any physical way. And because there's one particular incident that I'm thinking of in my head where I called him for advice, but in his mind, he thought I was asking him to get involved in something where he would have to pick a side or kind of deal with some things between my sisters and I. And it turned into this massive fight. And so I went back, I left it for a few weeks. I wrote an email where I was able to be clear and concise. And I don't know that I was complimentary in it. So I don't know that I did the tickle first, but it took away any. I was just going to say,
it sounds like it was neutral.
Yes, neutral is the right word. With that being said, in the time since I have met you, you have guided me in dealing with my father, because we've talked about human design for a lot of people that are in my life. And for me, it feels like a superpower, because without the conversation we had was different, but it was about his design first and foremost. And I always lead with the tickle first now, and it works beautifully.
Yeah.
And if there's a situation that I can feel bubbling up, I go back to that, compliment him, acknowledge the wonderful things that he has done. And my father has done many wonderful things for me that I'm very grateful for. And so I focus on that, and then I'm able to get to the heart of any conversation that I need to. So for me, that absolutely works. And it changed the dynamic that I don't need to write these emails that are from a neutral place, because we never get to that anymore.
Oh, that's profound. Love. Thank you for sharing that.
I feel like I'm in class.
Thank
you for your Now, Anne, it's your turn.
I like that Jamie says, isn't that the same as a compliment sandwich? And I think I've heard that word too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if I need to talk about this. I feel like it's interesting for me that I had a really, I don't know how I would explain my relationship with my dad when I was younger, but it was sort of like I kind of kept out of the way, and he would have tension with either my mom and dad eventually divorced, or my brother. And I kind of didn't ever get that anger, but I also never really interacted with him a lot. So if he said something to me that I found unfair, or like he would just suddenly tell me to do something, and I would think, I'm just standing here, I'm not even trying to do anything, I would right away respond right back at him like, that's not fair, and I would say whatever I thought. Whereas no one else in my family, I felt, would ever stand up to him and just say what they thought. That was my impression. I'm sure they think that they were. And so we'd kind of have an exchange. Then it would die out and everything would be good. And I could say, hey, this is what I was really thinking. I don't, and then I would share what I liked about the situation or what he was doing. So it's not really tickle, slap, tickle, or sandwich or anything. It was sort of just some crazy thing would happen and draw me in, and then it would get resolved.
Okay, so you would be authentic and honest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had the benefit of being a 1-3, right?
Mm,
Because then he could then get pulled into your process as a
mm,
1-3 because you're the one who draws the agenda. And then he would later see what was going on because you would take the time to then have a conversation about it.
okay. That's
That's
interesting. Yeah.
that's wonderful. But if you had been a 6-2, it would have been a very different experience
Hmm.
because you would be transpersonal, and then he would feel like, no, you need to move to the beat of my drum. And then the thing that he was saying would be viewed as offensive,
Hmm.
right? And so you were, you know, as a bladder archetype, in terms of your genetic personality, your genius is honesty,
Hmm.
right? And so if you're leading with honesty, and because the bladder's the energy for emotional balance, right? You're coming from a platform that most people aren't afforded. Only 1/16 of the population is afforded that platform,
Hmm.
right? And so then that would work out really well for you. And yet you
Okay.
had a husband. So how did things go with your husband when you would give him a little criticism? Did that turn out great?
I don't know what happened there. I don't even know what was going on. But you know, I don't even know whether I gave him criticism, but he took anything as criticism. Like you could compliment him and he would say, "Well, you didn't say that," or like it was really difficult to figure out how to respond or even just like cuz he would take just my honesty or being happy in the moment. He would not be happy with that. It was just a situation where any way that I was being, I felt like he was not accepting it. He did for
Okay.
a long time,
Hmm.
and yeah, I don't really think I never would criticize. So I probably was being inauthentic though, if you put
Okay,
it that
got it.
way.
So then with him, you chose to be dishonest,
Hmm.
right? And lower your station so that you would avoid having to feel the way he made you felt if you were honest.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then did that relationship end up in divorce?
Yes.
Yeah, like that makes
Mhm.
good sense, right? Because then you would, if we go back to what we first started speaking about, right? Is he would come into your body, he would ejaculate in you, and then you would take on his strategies. But
Mm.
then those strategies would never work against him because he is him. Do you
Mhm.
understand what I mean by that?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we're trying to get people to understand that if you have a toxic relationship with either of your parents, right? There's a way to go about it where you can have a more successful conversation. Yet, particularly if you're a woman and you want to be in a healthy relationship, you're going to have to repair the relationship with your man because you're having a relationship with your man, because if you don't do that, your man will feel like he's suffering through the terrible relationship you had with your dad. And so in that place, if you're going to be a mom with this person, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your children to make sure that you balance that relationship back out and take responsibility for your half. And if you've put forward the effort, then you should feel good about that. How they take it isn't up to you, but how you deliver it, the place where you're coming from, your intent behind it, that is all within your power. And if you are with a person who has no ability to have a conversation about anything that they do wrong, you just say that you're sorry. Hey, you know what? I'm going to say that I'm sorry for what I've done. I know that that was hurtful to you in some way. And you take responsibility for your half because everything is co created.
Mm.
And so the power that a woman wants to maintain is her sovereignty over herself. And in a casual relationship, men ejaculating your body, there's probably a better idea out there.
Right.
So for these women that are trying to repair their relationship with their father, if they're not able to actually bring peace to that relationship in the very real and physical world, as long as they're doing the work from their side, even if they can only do it psychically, and they're able to bring themselves to a place of neutrality, that can be enough.
Well, yeah, that can be enough. And there's a way to do it, right? There's a system out there called Body of Light. And you would be doing a transmutative meditation, which takes about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And if you have 45 to 60 minutes and you go through that process, I can promise you that the relationship with your parent, or the relationship with your lover, or the relationship with your child that's toxic and complex will change immediately. So there's ways to do that. And you don't have to do that with the parent or the child or the lover or the husband or the coworker. You can do that on your own, because the way that we were designed, do you think that a god would send you to a planet where you had to live at the effect of other people's abuse and you would have no power over that? No, like, a human would come up with that idea, right? They'd turn that into like a video game. But a god is more intelligent than that. And so we were endowed with the ability to effectively change every single relationship that we have because we want to. It isn't up to the other person. Because in a transmutative meditation, I can then take all of that angst and all of that upset and all of that anger and all of that confusion and all of that fear, and I can transmute that into the exact opposite, and I can send it right back to their heart center. And when I do that, they will change instantaneously. So there's ways to repair the relationship where we can get beyond their inner deficiencies, we can get beyond their insecurities, we can get beyond their defenses and be able to repair the relationship because we're coming from the right place. And so when people come to my office, like, literally a woman can come to my office who's been raped by 7 different people. And by the time we do the transmutative meditation on those 7 events, within a week, she will either receive an Instagram message, a Facebook message, a letter in the mail with someone apologizing, without them even knowing that we went through the transmutative meditation. Because once you repair the frequency and the energy between you and another person, that relationship moves back to neutrality and moves back to sacredness. And every human being has the absolute right to do that in every relationship that they've ever had, and every relationship that they have now, and every relationship they will have in the future. And I would put the 45 minutes to 50 minutes aside and do a transmutative meditation and clear the energy between you and the other person. And every human has a right to do that. No one has a right to have power over you. No God would allow that to happen. So the tools have been sent to this planet for every human to rectify and repair every toxic relationship that they've had, regardless of whether the other person wants to or not. Every being has a right to be sovereign, and there's ways to do it. And you just happen to have the guy on the call with you that knows how to do that. Lickety split. And, I've brought this technology to the planet so that men and women who have been abused when they were in their childhood have a right to separate from the devastation of that experience that's interfering with their life experience and their potential to feel love, the potential to feel safe, the potential to feel joy, the potential to feel happiness. No one on this planet no longer needs to suffer for a minute longer from their toxic relationships and the effect of those toxic relationships. Because when you look at people that you're driving by in the road that are homeless, that are sitting there on the side of the road, every one of those people has been in a very toxic, suffocating, traumatic relationship, and they're suffering needlessly. And all they need to do is transmute that frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And look, if you care about yourself and you really care about this person, then what's the obvious actionable step to take? What's the prudent action to take? The prudent action is obvious to me. Transmute the negative frequency between you and them, because everything is a projection. We live on a third dimensional plane that's ruled by 4 absolutes: projection, reflection, manifestation, through generation. Those are the 4 frequencies. What do we have in human design? We have projectors, we have reflectors, we have manifestors, and we have generators. Why? Because those are the 4 absolute frequencies. How do we experience life on a third dimensional plane like we are here on Earth? We experience it through those 4 states. Well, every projection you created about your dad, if you have a bad relationship with your dad, or every projection you've created about your lover or your husband, every time you create a negative projection about that person, their heart gets further away from you. Every negative projection you create, they get further away from you. And then before you know it, 7 years later, you wake up in the morning, you're like, yeah, I think the relationship is over. He thinks you're crazy. You think he's an asshole. Things are done, right? But at the end of the day, that none of that is true. The only thing that's happened is there's been experiences that have occurred that are beyond your capacity to process, because you lack the consciousness of that level of distortion.
But how does that logic apply to people that have been in abusive relationships, as in physical abuse that's
Easy.
going on, whether it be from their parents or their lover or...
Easy, same thing. You transmute that frequency. And when you transmute that frequency, it comes out of the body.
No, what I mean is when
Okay.
these relationships are ending. So
Yes.
you're talking about this is, I understand the part about it being co-created, but you're saying, these are projections that you've put on them. And so then you get to a point where you say the relationship's over. But when you're being physically abused, when you're being beaten again by mother, father, partner, whatever.
Husband, brother.
Yeah. When that's going on, is that still just a negative projection that's being put out there? Because there's a very real world consequence.
Yeah, because what happens is now you have a projection about them and they have the exact opposite projection about you. And then that creates conflict, right? And so what we can be self-responsible for are the things that we're projecting in the field. And this is where neutrality is beneficial. So let's say, for instance, and I'm giving little tools here and tricks so people can understand that they can take action for themselves. What's the easiest thing to do? If you're a woman and you're married to a man who's physically and violently explosive, what's the easiest question for you to ask him? What are your 2 strongest negative projections about your mom? And he might say, hold on. He might say, she's closed-minded and she's controlling. Okay? And now she has the information. She goes over, she grabs the tablet, and she says, okay, I'm writing this down. She writes down his mom's closed-minded and she's controlling. And now she knows what the 2 triggers are for him. And the second that she expresses a closed mind, or he feels like she's isolating him and controlling him, he's going to go into this explosive expression to tell her, you don't have a right to do that to me, mom. Right? He may not say mom, but he's taking that fight to her. And so let's say the roles are flipped the exact opposite way. Let's say it's a man and he's with a woman, she's verbally violent, right? And he goes to her and he goes, look, what are your first, he warms her up. What are your 2 strongest positive projections about your dad? And she'll go, well, I tell you all the time, like he's super smart and he's very generous. And he's like, cool. Now he knows why she's with him. She's with me because her projection is that I'm smart and she loves the fact that I'm generous. And then he goes, hey, listen, what are your 2 strongest negative projections about your dad? And she goes, well, he's narcissistic and he's always right. Oh, and he can never be wrong, right? Those are her two strongest projections, right? Well, as long as she has those projections about her dad, her man is required and hired to be that way. So what's the first thing she should do? Go and do her transmutation on those negative projections she has about her dad. Now, he or she no longer has control over the other partner in that way. So it's our parents' inner deficiencies and insecurities and limiting beliefs and fears that have made their way into us. And then we magnetize and attract a partner that has our parents' insecurities, inner deficiencies, and limiting beliefs. So what's the prudent action to take? The prudent action to take is to figure out what are those negative projections that I have about my mom or my dad. And the two positive projections. And now I know where the relationship can go. I know where the potential is. I know where the landmines are. And then I don't have to step on them. But if she pisses me off, then I can step on those and I'm guaranteed to get her triggered, right? Guaranteed. Because now you know. And that would be the easiest thing for any couple to do. Easiest thing for any child to do with their parent. Find out what their two strongest positive and negative projections they have about their parents. That will tell you the things that make them happy and the things that make them angry.
Okay, so just in regard to my abusive relationship, first of all, if I had have asked him about negative projections, he would have said, no, I love my mum. She's amazing. She spends too much money, and because she would go and buy properties. And I don't know what the other one would have been, but the reason I'm asking this and pushing this is because his negative projections, because one of the things with his mother was she had a mental breakdown after leaving an abusive relationship herself. And then she was mismedicated for 10 years and her brain was fried.
Yeah.
And so her decision-making wasn't the best. She was a lovely woman. She was, not particularly strong. In terms of triggers for him around me, I didn't go and buy properties. My brain wasn't fried. So I don't know how those negative projections could have led to the violence that it led to.
Yeah, but the thing is that he displayed similar levels of violence that your mother displayed.
Well, yes.
Of course. So what happens is you were essentially in a relationship with your mom.
Awesome.
Right? And then what was happening is you were displaying the ways in which his father would respond to reality. And so his dad married your mom.
But how was I his dad if his dad was abusive?
How are you his dad? You're his dad because the abuse that he's experiencing as a kid, you also experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So your nervous system has the same type of tolerance that his nervous system does.
Mm.
Okay? And so he's going to be triggered by you because you have, what would you say your strategies are in relationship?
Now or then?
Then. Like if you're worked up and you're stressed, how would you respond when you were, 30?
Well, my strategy changed after him. So him and my ex-husband, if I was triggered, it would be a yelling and screaming match and name calling and all sorts of things. It was very, what I would say, high school type of arguing.
Okay.
After him,
Mhm.
that changed.
Okay. What I'm saying is we're going from womb until like 16.
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're looking at those. So a child's subconscious and unconscious is impacted for men, womb basically to 19 or 20 years old, and for a woman up until about 13 or 16, because women become cognitive earlier than men. So when you were with Scott, you're saying that you were verbally explosive.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're verbally explosive, is that considered to be abusive? If it's coming through
Well,
the throat of a manifester, not a generator, not a projector. If it's coming through the throat of a manifester, how's that going to be experienced by the other person?
well, yes, but it was, here's my justification. It was in response to what was being done to me.
Yeah, but what we're
My
saying
point is,
is,
I wasn't initiating this. I wasn't coming into the room and exploding at him for no reason.
yeah, of course, everyone has a reason for the way in which they act out when they're stressed, right? But his stress patterns and his parents matches your stress patterns and your parents, is essentially what we're saying. And once you're triggered, you're going to come with boom. So who used to be, so if you looked at your mom and your dad, if you poke your dad in the right way, is he going to be physically abusive or verbally abusive?
No, he would be more verbal.
Yeah, that's right. He'd be more verbally abusive, right? So then what would you give Scott
Can we stop
if he
using
poked you in the
blame?
wrong way? Oh, okay. Yeah. If it was Jake, what would you? Oh, not his name either. Okay. If it was Mike.
No, it's fine. I'm laughing, but Jake it is. Yeah, when he would lie, when he would cheat, when he would start coming at me, because there was a level of mental and emotional abuse that was taking place before there was ever any physical violence. And yeah, I would respond by raising my voice because I didn't feel that I was being heard. And back then, the best way to be heard was to get very loud.
Yeah. And so my point is that his interpretation of that loudness coming through an emotionally defined manifestor with a defined ego driving into your throat definitely felt like you were smashing him with a baseball bat, which would be the same experience he would have had of his father. And then at some point, he would have felt like, okay, I'm going to take this to the next level. And then you probably would say, okay, well, you've taken it to a level that I will no longer tolerate. And peace out, and you can move on with your life. What I'm suggesting is this: if you had known his two strongest negative projections about his mom and about his dad, and you had investigated that in the beginning of the first date that you ever had with him, you would have already known exactly how he was going to behave when he was stressed and he felt threatened by you. Every woman on the planet can do that on the first date. Soften the conversation. And how's your relationship with your dad? Well, it's a little complex, but me and my mom are great. And so, well, okay, well, I have a similar thing, except my relationship's good with my dad, but my mom is it's always stressed. So, my two strongest negative projections about my mom is that new positive projections that she's this and this. What are your two strongest positive projections about your mom? Oh, well, my mom's this and this. You got your iPhone out. You're typing that up. And then, well, let me tell you the two strongest negative projections I have about my dad. Oh, my dad, I have this. Oh, my mom, I have this. Now you know exactly how they're going to respond when they feel threatened. You know exactly how they're going to respond when they feel celebrated.
So I always focused on the wrong thing. I was always making sure I asked questions, because I know people say you never ask about, talk about past relationships. I always want to hear whoever I'm dating talk about their exes, because for me, the way I judged them was how they speak of their ex or exes tells you so much. If every single ex is crazy, and they're the crazy one, but the person that you're sitting with apparently is an angel in it, it's like you're the common denominator and you're telling me 5 people are crazy. if they speak really positively and, you know, listen, it didn't work, she's a great mother, she's this, she's that, she's all these things, that would make me feel a little bit better about moving forward, because there's respect there for their past, their history, what they've created together, but it was time to move on. But clearly that was the wrong thing to focus on.
So what would you focus on now? What would you be asking based off what we shared today?
Well, Mr. Maher, I would focus on things that you have talked about in class today in asking the questions about the parents.
Yeah, which two, right? What are the two strongest positive projections?
Mhm.
Because those are going to allow you to know how they're going to treat you when they're celebrated. And their two strongest negative projections about mom and dad, because that's going to let you know how they behave when they feel threatened by you.
Well, what do you think about somebody who has nothing negative to say about one of their parents?
Well,
Or if
yeah,
they say this parent was the victimized one all the time and they're a saint, and put them on a
yeah,
pedestal.
it's okay. I get people that start out that way, right? Because that's obviously like a big part of my practice, right? It's to do a thorough investigation. So I know who I'm sitting across from, right? And then, because you have to understand, one, that if you have no idea what your positive or negative projections are about your parents, then obviously you don't know who they are, and you were absent for the 18 years that you lived in their house at an emotional, at a psychological, at an energetic level. Okay. So everybody has witnessed a shortcoming and a lack of maturity in some area in their parent. And so the likelihood is, if someone finds it difficult to do, they want to protect the parent, or they want to protect the parent in their mind, right? Because they want to have a good relationship with the parent. So they're unwilling to look at the negative. But if you are clever in your investigation, you'll be able to draw it out of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you might say something like, well, there must be something that your mother's done that triggered your dad. Oh, well, whenever she did this, that triggered my dad. Well, what did she do that triggered you? There must have been one time when you were bothered by something that she was doing. You must have been agitated at least one time. It would be unrealistic for your mother to be the only perfect human ever born, right? Oh yeah, okay. You're right. Yeah, that's a dumb idea. Okay. Well, to be honest, they start out with that and then they tell me. Right. And so you just have to be, you're 1-3, right? So you're good at investigating. Investigating is on the front end for you. Okay. Natalie, you're 4-6. So you spent your first 28 years as an investigator. Of course, you turned into a journalist, right? And so you know how to investigate. And so you have to be willing to ask questions. And so to go back to tie in everything we've been talking about, the women who are on these dating apps, these are some of the questions you should be asking. Because if you're going to let some dude come in and ejaculate into your body, you better know how he's going to behave when he feels threatened. You better find out how he's going to behave when he feels insecure. And you got to know, is that something you can handle? Because when he's putting his ejaculate into you, he's putting that energy into you. And now that energy is becoming part of you. Is that what you want to participate in? And if you don't, then obviously sheathe that penis. Wrap that thing tight.
We have to wrap this up because we're out of time. But I have one last question, and it has to be a short answer. But what about men in a homosexual relationship? Is the same sort of imprint made or no?
The same thing is occurring.
It is.
Yes, because you have to understand that the thing about sperm is sperm carries energy and information. That's its job. it carries, like when it goes into the woman's egg, it brings an entire being into existence. So the same thing is occurring. So you have to be really, really mindful of anyone that you're allowing to bring that energy. Like, look, women perform fellatio, right? If you're swallowing ejaculate, you need to be mindful of whose ejaculate you're swallowing, and you need to know who they are. Okay? Because that energy is coming into the middle of your body, and it will corrupt. It's no different than having a computer, right? And someone sends a virus into your computer. What happens? You don't even know the person. You're at this website, like reading about sports, and your computer says, "Oh, I detect the virus has been into you." It's in there corrupting your hard drive. Like, let's just make it very neutral for everyone. When you bring ejaculate that you don't understand, that has challenges and problems that are beyond your capacity to be able to manage and hold, then you're inviting in a problem that will cause issues for you. And so be mindful of what you're inviting in, and ask these very basic questions to anyone you want to get into at least a semi-serious relationship, because they're going to start behaving this way as they start feeling more comfortable for you. And at least if you got the data and the information on the front end, you won't be bothered in the middle when you wake up and like, I thought he was an apple tree. He's not an apple tree. He's a potato field. He's not sweet at all. Well, if you know you're buying potatoes, you're not upset that that's what you're eating for dinner. But if you think you're buying apples, and you serve this pie at Thanksgiving, and everyone looks at you with a frown on their face, and you're like, "What's wrong?" They're like, "This tastes terrible. This doesn't taste like apple pie. Is there something wrong with this?" Then you know what you signed up for.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this. Christopher, thank you so much for taking time after your very long day to sit and have this conversation with us. It was sort of what I had planned, but nothing like it really. And I think that's the best possible way that it could have played out. So thank you so much. And thank you, as always, for always doing this with me. I have so much fun having these conversations. And I will have all the links for you, Christopher, in the description below so people can find you, buy your book, watch the first episode that we did together where we really go into detail about all of the incredible work that you do. And we'll have to come back again at some point in the future so Anne and I can compare notes with the teacher in the room and talk about our experiences going through the 5-day and everything else that has happened since.
Yes.
Well, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And one, thank you for having me here. You're both so gracious and beautiful and wonderful. And I'm happy that we're on the journey together.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Everybody remember your advice from tonight too.
Yes. Positive and negative projections that they have about their parents. Get those. And then, yeah, you understand. I've said it 100 different ways.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the chat's been lighting up. People have had a great time with this conversation. So thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.